Please be aware that that has been done.
So we ready to start?
I believe so, whenever you all are.
So we've got a quorum here for the DCTA
We
board?
do. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, my name is Chris Watts, chairman of the board of DCTA. I'll call this meeting to order, this joint meeting of the DCTA board and the NTMC board. And DCTA board does have a quorum. So I will call the DCTA board meeting to order and pass it to Chair Euchert.
Thank you, Chairman Watts. This is Dean Euchert, chairman of the NTMC board, and we do have all members of the NTMC board present. So we will also call this joint meeting to order, and we will pass it on to the invocation.
All right. I'll go ahead and give the invocation.
Thank you.
Dear Lord, thank you so much for this day and for your love and your grace, and just ask that you bring healing to our country, that you bring healing to those who are sick, and you bring peace and solace to those who have lost those in this pandemic. Help us just to walk in your ways and to be mindful of those around us who are in need and to be useful to meet those needs. In Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
All right, the public comment. Now, Lindsay, am I to understand that, I know I need to read the public comment. Does NTMC need to read the public comment as well? Because I think they might have done that in their last meeting. So we just all need to do it again?
That is correct. And I think I'll ask Joe. Joe, what is the best way to handle this? I know the public comment from Jim Owen.
Chris, if you want to go ahead, Chairman Watts, if you want to go ahead and read it, we just need one reading of it.
One reading?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so this is public comment from Jim Owen, Section 7, Warriors, CDL Union Bus Operator, openly requesting that the summer bid for UNT be canceled and redone, separating out for furlough the 10 to 16 drivers in company seniority order who are willing to cancel their company health insurance for the future, with the exception of life, which was separately negotiated in 2015 and 2018. Summer of December 15th to January 2nd spring break, with no objection to filing for unemployment. We have credible insurance and can save NTMC over $10,000 each per annum. Offering everyone health care without asking drivers costs $692,000 in the budget. Ignoring the collective bargaining agreement and making everyone full-time and mixing city routes and UNT routes in the bids, violating the CBA in paren, constitutes bad faith bargaining and unfair labor practices. In summer sessions, it only takes 18 to 20 drivers to cover Maymester, Summer 1, and Summer 2. This has been done this way for over 5 years. Drivers are leaving, 7 as of this coming week. UNT says that in September, they will be at 90%. That number will take at least 100 drivers. Your new general manager and 2 or 3 street supervisors are having to drive bus routes almost every other day now. And that is the end of the public comment, at least that I have right now. Is there any other public comment that needs to be read or recognized?
No, sir, there are no hands raised and no further public comments that have been sent to me.
Okay. All right, then we will move on to our joint meeting regular agenda. Hold a discussion regarding NTMC providing continued service to DCTA pursuant to the interlocal agreement for mobility services operations, and receive an update from DCTA regarding future mobility services. Where would we like to begin the discussion? Chairman Euchert, do you have some comments from maybe the meeting on Monday, or questions, or some guidance you might need from the DCTA board that we can address?
Yes, sir. We did have a good meeting Monday. I think when we go into those discussions at that time, we have it posted, we will convene into an executive session. Okay. But before we do that, and well, let me ask this, Councilor Graffita, what I'm looking for maybe is if the NTMC board could possibly get a little direction from DCTA as to the ongoing future of bus operations with NTMC. Can you do that in closed session, or is that out here?
No, that would have to be done here in public session.
Okay, Chairman Watts, do you feel like now you'd like to kind of give us an update on as to where DCTA stands on their bus operations, or would you like for us to have our meeting closed session first?
I think we can give an update, because I think part of the challenge right now, I think part of the challenge that maybe NTMC has faced over the last couple of weeks is the board really hasn't, I mean, we've talked about bus service either with Trinity Metro, Turnkey, Partnership, another local government corporation, but we haven't really gone into too much detail, and the board certainly hasn't made any definitive decisions on that. So I think that's something that we're going to be working at diligently here in the next couple of months. Just number one, to give DCTA direction on where we're heading, because we do have those MOS contracts out with On Demand and those proposals out, and also so that we can give NTMC some updated information. So I would like to be able to say, give you a timeline of 2 or 3 months or 4 months, but unless I've missed something in one of the board meetings, I don't think that we're at a point to do that. I don't think it would extend beyond 8 months to a year. I'm hoping that we can get some things in place sooner than that, but not having those detailed discussions and seeing the final proposal from VIA, it's hard to make that kind of determination. I think once we do get the data, I think the board can move quite efficiently and expeditiously in order to, put some things in place, and would certainly keep NTMC updated all along the way, because I know you guys are the ones that run the bus operations for us, and it's critical that you be in the loop with, where we are. And that's vague, doesn't give you much information. And certainly if there's someone on the meeting, Raymond or any other board member that has a different take on that, please feel free to speak up, because that's just sort of my perspective from where I stand. So I think once we hear what's happening with what happened with NTMC and sort of what you guys have decided as far as collective bargaining or general manager positions, we may be able to integrate more of those details and facts together to come up with something that's a little bit more solid.
Chair Watts, it appears Director Costa has her hand raised.
Yes.
Yeah, so Chairman, I just want to just kind of echo what you're saying. I feel like I always need to apologize to our NTMC board because the direction that we've been given, and I know that y'all's time is extremely valuable. You all were handpicked by this board. And I think unfortunately right now, because of so many things as our chairman described, our MOS contract, we are in that holding pattern to see where DCTA is going to move in order to be able to give you more information on what we're going to need from that NTMC board. If you recall, when it was initiated, it was actually DCTA board members sitting on that board. So it wasn't as frustrating because we all had firsthand information of where we were going. But I see, again, maybe we could communicate better as a board, DCTA board to the NTMC board. But we are very much in negotiations, as our chairman said. In fact, we're having a special meeting next week, and we're diligently trying to come up with what our needs are going to be and assessing that in order to be able to give NTMC the information that they need to move forward. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Board Chair, I will just echo your sentiment. I think it's too early for us to know exactly where we are. We still have quite a bit of negotiations to do with Trinity Metro. There's several options that we still have to pursue, and it's likely going to take many months before we get to a decision point and we have clarity around the subject. So I'm in agreement with you. Thank you. You're on mute.
Help me understand, because I know you, at our last board meeting or through conversations we've had with Trinity Metro, we realized that there may have been some, I'm going to say, miscommunication about board members and, you know, the TMAT or whatever they're calling. So what is it exactly that now we are negotiating or wanting to negotiate with Trinity Metro? In other words, what are the issues that we're trying to negotiate?
If you recall, we presented a letter of intent. It laid out the areas that we would propose were opportunities for us to work together, predominantly to run the service for the routes that we identify. In this case, it would be the majority of the UNT routes post implementation of the MOS contract.
Joe, are we on posting?
Pardon me?
I was asking Joe, are we on posting?
He is.
I mean, I would have steered us off if we're not, so I just want to make sure.
We're okay. We're okay.
Okay, all right, go ahead. I'm sorry,
So,
Raymond, interrupted.
I think there were two primary threads of logic. One is, can we do business with Trinity Metro, and what are the opportunities that would be beneficial to both agencies from an operational execution perspective? The second was, what's the makeup of, if we were to do business through a local government corporation, what would the makeup of the board be?
Well, that's in the past, Raymond.
Correct.
What are we, when you say we've got things that we're negotiating? I know one of them is, do we want to have a turnkey interlocal agreement with Trinity Metro to operate our bus system?
That's correct.
What
Yes.
Are there any others?
Are there opportunities for joint procurements of materials such as tires and parts and things that are not within?
Okay, is that through some formal partnership, or is that just sort of, we can use their, what do they call them, the buy boards, or, you know, we can use other local entities' purchasing agreements? So it seems like our most pressing need, as far as it relates to NTMC as well, is how are we going to handle the bus system? In other words,
Right.
Are we going to execute a contract with Trinity Metro for a turnkey operation, or are we going to just maintain it ourselves? I don't think there's really a hybrid in there anywhere. I don't think there's a middle ground.
That's right.
So given that issue, which to me is the most pressing, what kind of, I'm going to say time, I mean, so if we're singularly focused on that, because the others we can do that anytime.
Right.
We're not under a time constraint. What can we realistically expect to come to some type of basic term sheet that can be presented to each respective board for discussion and or approval?
I would think within the next 90 days, we'll have that vetted out between both boards comfortably.
Okay. All right.
And
Good.
if I could add, we do have an item on the DCTA board agenda, the April 22nd, to share a draft ILA and cost assumptions with the board as a starting point.
Great. Wonderful. So that's helpful, I think, to the NTMC board to understand that in the next 90 days, some of the issues regarding the responsibilities of the parties, respective parties, we could get some really firm direction in that regard.
Yes, and then obviously we'd both agencies, assuming that we were to reach an agreement that we wanted to move forward, then we would have to talk about the implementation timeline.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep. So 90 days to get the terms maybe worked out, and then however long it takes to integrate that and to make that come forward.
Correct.
Great. Okay. Fantastic. That's great information. Thank you, Raymond. Any other questions or comments on this particular agenda item? Anybody from NTMC? Is
Chairman
that
Watts.
helpful? Go ahead.
Yes, Chairman Watts, this is Chair Euchre. I do want to thank you for that. I think we were in limbo of that information. And I do think that that helps us. It sounds as though to me, and of course I opened up to the rest of the NTMC board members, but it sounds to me though, right now, until we come to some type of a definitive agreement in a time frame, we probably need to operate as normal going forward for the near future anyway, just as if nothing is happening, to make sure that everything is coincides with whatever we decide to do in the future. So, and I'm certainly not trying to pressure y'all in any certain way. I know that y'all need to do your due diligence. To the DCTA board needs to do their due diligence, making certain they're doing the best that they can for the transportation here in Denton County. So I think that will help us and give us a little bit of clarification as to how to go forward. Does any other board member have anything they'd like to add to that?
No, I would just, this is Sarah. I agree with you, Chair Euchert. And I think the more communication and effective communication we can receive, the better decisions we can make. And as we move into another discussion here, I think this timing that's being questioned is very important on the decisions that we're making. In regards to contracts. So it would be helpful to know if things are moving expeditiously and we'll know more in 90 days, that plays a part in how we make decisions as an NTMC board.
Yes.
Yes, and I would just like to say that certainly communication is absolutely critical. And we've had several challenges with regard to communication. At the same time, we've had extraordinary conditions that we've all been challenged with, both regionally and personally, with folks losing power, storms, a lot of different things that really put a strain on human beings that are trying to do a very good job in a lot of different challenges. That's not an excuse. It's a reality that we've had to address. We've had a loss of a key individual in Brandy because she communicated directly with both boards. It's a shame that that's happened, but we recognize that communication absolutely is imperative. It has also slowed down some of the conversations that we've had, frankly, with Training Metro, because they've been focused on TMS shuttles and weather events and COVID. And so I think both agencies have been extremely strained in trying to bring a set of decisions in front of our board specifically so that we can bring this to a head. And I think all of those things, when you bring them together, have caused some communication challenges as well as some delays in getting answers, because as we've tried to schedule meetings, it's been a challenge. There's been absolutely other priorities that have taken more priority over getting the ILA completed. So we'll do our best to work with Train Metro. We have a series of workshops just set up just to make sure that the details are well enough understood so that we can create an ILA for both sides to be comfortable, and so that we can try to bring some clarity in the very near future so that we can move the agency forward. Thank you.
If nobody else has anything else, Chairman Watts, if it would be all right with you, I would like to ask that we go into closed session, executive session for items 1 and items 2 on this agenda. Counselor, is that all right with you, Chairman Watts?
Sure. Is it under, are we going into executive session for legal advice, or what's the?
I guess that's that would be my question. Is on item 1, unless I'm missing something, I don't really see what legal advice there would be regarding, the future mobility services.
I did have a couple of questions, legal advice, as far as management. Is that what you're talking about, management services?
That will be on item 2.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry then. You're right. I'm sorry. So it would just be item 2 then. You're right. I'm sorry.
So do you want to go ahead and go into executive session on item 2 first?
Well, I guess, is there anything else that needs to be done on item one? I guess.
Yeah, I have a couple of clarifying questions on item one, if that's okay.
Sure, I'm sorry.
That's all right, Dean. It's hard on Zoom. When did we start talking with Trinity Metro as a DCTA board about them taking all this on? What month was that?
In November of 2020 is when we had when the board authorized Raymond to sign the letter of intent.
Okay. And when did we have the loss of our staff member where we had a disruption and needed to reassign that communication?
December 16th.
And who took that on?
It has been a shared responsibility between myself, Christina Holcomb.
So there's no one person responsible for communicating that information from DCTA to NTMC?
It has been Lindsay Baker.
Okay.
Christina, I can barely hear you.
Okay, I'll try to speak up. Sorry, I have a new laptop, so.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, that's okay.
So I get that there's been difficulties, but what I'm seeing here, and this is probably just my interpretation, is that we've gone on, 90 days plus another 60 where none of this has been, literally none of this has been communicated to NTMC. I don't see how, here I have NTMC board members telling me in this call right now that if they had heard that we were having these conversations, they might have slowed down or tapped the brakes a bit. So that's almost 5 months of them saying that they hadn't heard about this. I don't think a snowstorm.
Heard about
that
what?
issue.
Can you clarify your comment, please?
So we've started in November talking. We approved in November that we would be discussing moving all of the bus services to NTMC. Negotiation of the contract with the union. All of that was given to you in November, right? I got Nicole shaking her head, yes.
Yes, Mr. Gilmore. So if you'll recall, in November, we provided that really colorful flow chart.
Yep.
All of the priority actions. From that point forward, starting in November, on a monthly basis, that flow chart plus a verbal update on all of those initiatives have been provided to the NTMC board.
Okay. And so just a couple moments ago, as I understood it, I have board members of NTMC saying that if they had known what we were talking about with Trinity Metro, they would have tapped the brakes on making some of the decisions that they were having to make this past month or this past meeting. What broke? What's not working?
I think staff, I do think that staff would like some clarity as to how the NTMC board would prefer communications regarding these major priorities for DCTA. I myself have been giving verbal updates that mirror the updates that I provide to the DCTA board on MOS, Trinity Metro, and then any updates regarding the CBA negotiations. So if there's more information that we could provide or additional dialogue that would need to occur during the NTMC board meeting, I can let you know that staff would absolutely be open to that.
So, we've been very clear in our intent was that we were going to have a conversation of moving all the bus services and the negotiation to Trinity Metro. Am I off base on that? That I think was the intent of the November, given that to Raymond, is those two decision points. We were just in discussions with Trinity Metro to have them provide. And is that how, or am I misremembering that?
No, that's correct.
Okay, so that's good. I'm great. If
Yes.
those two decision points were made in November, how is it that we are now at the end of March and NTMC doesn't have clarity that we are discussing those two things to move them to Trinity Metro.
I can't speak on behalf of the other board members of the NTMC, but I can tell you that Nicole has been providing the same update on the milestone matrix and where we are with NTMC.
Gotcha. And so Raymond, you're on that board, right?
Yes, I am.
How does that board not know that we are looking to move these two decision points to Trinity Metro, and they make decisions that don't seem to have taken that into account? You're on that board. You have both sides of that conversation.
You're asking me a question I can't answer on behalf of the other board members, but I can tell you, and I will ask Nicole again to speak up, why the other board members are not up to date with the milestone matrix that we share and we brief the DCTA board about is the same milestone matrix that is shared with the NTMC board. We did not have a board meeting in February due to the storm. We should have had a special board meeting so that that additional briefing item would have been had. So, but I feel like I'm being asked a question about being a board member on the NTMC board, but also representing this agency. I think what you're hearing from Nicole is briefings have been made about where we're going with NTMC. I will not speak on behalf of DCTA's board as to whether or not the board is going to agree to move forward with Trinity Metro or not, because we have not gotten to that point. We're in conversations with NTMC. I think the question that's being asked by,
but NTMC. So I mean, you've got a decision that's been made by NTMC that now we're walking down the aisle with Trinity Metro. We're walking down the aisle, we're heading to the altar, and all of a sudden we're creating a section where it looks like here goes DCTA again, stepping things back.
So if you're going to ask me that question directly, I will say that in prior board meetings, when I spoke up to ask the board or to provide a briefing, I was asked to not talk about DCTA business because we were there to speak about NTMC business. I continue to be active board member on NTMC. I do provide input where it's necessary. I'm not in a position to speak on behalf of the DCTA board on whether we are not, or whether we're going to do business with Trinity Metro or not, because we have not reached that point in the conversations. I don't know whether
Raymond, you are in a position to say this is possibly going to impact DCTA negatively. It's going to create some issues. You are definitely in that position. You have that data, or your staff has that data and can provide it from staff if you're worried about the dual hat thing.
So again, I think what you're hearing from us is that briefings have been made, information has been given to this board. I can't speak on behalf of the other board members as to why they're not understanding that we are in conversations with NTMC when the information has been clearly given to the NTMC board. Again, the last conversation, the last board meeting we had prior to the March board meeting, which just transpired, it's early March, there was no February board meeting. Information was supposed to go out in packets. I received the packets because it comes through our email server, but it was my understanding that some of the information that should have gone to board members had gone into junk files. So if you're asking me why the other board members are not understanding that we are in conversations with NTMC, I'm surprised. I mean, with Trinity Metro, I'm surprised because information has been provided. The staff briefings have been provided.
Okay.
If I may,
I think that answers my concern.
As Director Gilmore has the floor, I just want to make a point that NTMC Director Hensley has had her hand up, and so has DCTA Director Costa.
Okay.
Yes. So I must be missing something. If I recall, on our January 28th meeting of this year, we had a joint meeting. And actually our agenda, joint meeting, regular agenda, addendum 2, item 2, DCTA status update on bus operations and maintenance partnership exploration. I mean, we talked about it.
In January.
January 28th, 9 a.m. was our joint meeting, and it was agenda item number 2 under joint meeting regular agenda.
I don't know what you're hearing because I've not been privy to it. I've not had the board chair of NTMC reach out as a board member and post their concern. I'm not aware of that. So I apologize, Board Member Gilmore, for what you're hearing.
Well, to that point, I get that we've got that. That's what I'm hearing in this call. Now, to give you another piece of the puzzle that's kind of got me concerned is today's the first day that we were informed that it's a 90-day window for Trinity Metro. I don't think either board has gotten any timelines
Exactly.
until today.
That was my point. This is Sarah. I'm not one to, there were a lot of perfect storm situations that occurred, but the information that we receive in our briefings through NTMC are certainly somewhat helpful, but I think they are kind of vague because I think there is a caution by staff to not give information that, maybe they don't want to share as much that maybe is still being decided. Today is the first day, the very first day I've ever heard that we're about 90 days away. And that was my point in the point about communication. We just had a meeting on Monday that we needed to have as a special meeting because of the confusion and decisions that were made that we were not engaged in. And now, after we had the meeting on Monday where we were making some significant decisions, we find out we're 90 days away from possibly having something. This is where, as a board member, I don't know how to make a decision when I'm not, I mean, we just made some statements about what was going on Monday. And now I'm finding out we're 90 days possibly away that could impact the decision that we'll be coming back with that maybe we don't need to do.
Well, hold on a
Could you
second.
explain
We have
what the
90
90
days.
days?
We have 90 days. I was asked the question today. I have no idea how the conversations are going to transpire with Trinity Metro. I have no idea how this board is going to respond to what Trinity Metro is going to suggest. The question that was asked to me is, how long do we think it would take for us to have an answer? If I think about it, we have a board meeting coming up to discuss it in April. It's on the agenda. We have a workshop set up with Trinity Metro. These things can take, I don't know if 90 days is going to be the right answer. I agreed with our board chair that we don't know. I don't know how our board is going to respond to whatever Trinity Metro suggests. I don't currently have an idea, nor does our staff, as to what Trinity Metro is going to desire in the interlocal agreement. He said, when do you reasonably think we could potentially have something to look at? And Nicole agreed that we could have something within the next 9 days. We may not have something within the next 90 days. I feel like there's because of what was asked specifically about a particular question, that there's question about whether or not I'm providing the appropriate level of communication. I am one of 5 board members on the NTMC. I have been asked to not talk about NTMC business or DCTA business in the past. If we need to go back and look at the recordings, I believe that there's information in there that would support my comment. But I don't have at this point an understanding, and that's why we're here today, to have a conversation to allow the board members to provide their own feedback about when we think we'll get there. I also said, as we talked about 90 days, it could be the end of the year. I have no way of knowing at this point to give you any reasonable assurance as to when we'll have an agreement. These things can take months or they can take years, as we've seen with other negotiations that we've had with DART and other organizations. I just don't think it's fair to be saying, because I've mentioned 90 days, that was in context of when do we reasonably think we might have something to discuss and maybe deliberate, but I don't know what the results of that is going to be at this point.
And Raymond, Chair Ukert has had his hand raised, and Diane next.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, ma'am. I know we've had some good discussion here about some things that's happened, and I'm not really interested in pointing fingers, who did what happened, this, that. What I'd like to do is try to move forward, move this item forward so that we can get some type of resolution. I understand what Chairman Suarez is saying about the 90 days. However, also in our meetings, we've had discussion. I think Chairman Suarez has agreed that we're looking at probably 6 months to a year before the total evolvement of bus operations would go in another direction. And by that, I mean an agreement come together, it all put in place, all the legal documents done and everything transferred over, where day one, someone else does the operation. This goes away. So with that, I would kind of like for us to, unless somebody has something different on that, I kind of like for us to move forward with that probable assumption that it will probably be somewhere to 6 months to a year before we make some type of affirmative decision by everyone, including other parties that might take over the operation, and an agreement's come to on an exact date of transfer of the operations.
I appreciate that feedback, Chairman Ukert, because that is exactly the communication that I agree with. The idea of the NTMC's decision, which I was part of and voted for, was more than 90 days. It was more like 9 months to a year, because the fact that even if we are to reach an agreement within 90 days, it will take additional time to transition. I did say that in my previous comments. So we are looking at 9 months to a year before a transition would take place, and this contract should be extended for that period of time.
Thank you. And that was my thoughts. And so that would be my idea, that we try to move forward with that, unless someone else had some other questions or something on that. That would be my idea, to try to move forward with that prediction.
Director Costa does have her hand still raised.
Yeah, Chair Ukert, thank you. You said exactly what I was thinking. So thank you for that, because I know we've been talking about Trinity Metro, but that's not the only other organization that we're working with. We're still working with VM. We need to figure out what their recommendations are going to be going forward. So I appreciate Chairman Ukert, what you just said. I think that gives us all a little time to take a breath and do what we need to do to be able to move forward. And it gives us a timeline that I know NTMC needs and as they're making decisions. So thank you for that, Chairman Ukert.
Okay. I've got some comments to this, but I think they're more appropriate for agenda item number 2, because I think it's more specifically about the issues addressed in agenda item number 2. So I don't want to be outside of posting. So are there any more comments for agenda item number 1? All right, Chair Ukert, do you want to call agenda item number 2? And then if we need to go into executive session, we can do that as well.
Yes, sir. We'll go to agenda item number 2, hold a discussion, receive an update from NTMC related to the collective bargaining process and the NTMC general manager position, and request direction from DCTA on matters impacting DCTA budget for funding to NTMC for mobility services. And with that, in accordance to Counselor, where is it? I want to go this in the executive session. If you'll read that for me, sir.
Both boards will convene into executive session pursuant to section 551.01201 subsection 2 of the Texas Government Code for the purposes of seeking confidential legal advice from general counsel on agenda item 2.
If, Chair Euchard, if I could just make just a brief comment before we go into to closed session.
Yes.
It's just a general comment. And I too agree with moving forward. However, I think one of the characteristics of a good organization is we look at where we fumbled the ball. And we're having this discussion today. We had the discussion on Monday with the NTMC because of contract issues, because of miscommunication, because of lack of communication over the last 2 or 3 weeks regarding certain contracts, certain personnel. And we are here because of that. And I think it's vitally important that we do some analysis on how that happened and that we do it with, naked honesty and candor, because in other words, we've sort of been, I'm not going to, backed in a corner is not necessarily how I would characterize it, but we've sort of put the cart before the horse because I think there was a lack of communication. And it might not have been the lack of communication on we are in discussion. It might have been lack of communication with a greater sense of specificity on different matters with NTMC, which does affect DCTA because we have the budget. So obviously, if there's something that's going to impact the budget, DCTA board should be aware of that as well. So I don't want to lose sight that we're having these conversations because of a lot of different reasons, and some of them really haven't even been stated here today. But it's imperative that we go back and we shore that up and fill in those gaps, because this is, whether it costs a lot of money or not, this is sort of a fundamental principle of the governance between, a policy board and the day-to-day operations. So that's all the detail I'm going to go in on that. And I agree with the sentiment. We're here now. We need to move forward. But, one thing I taught my negotiation teams, the question you always ask is what would we do the same and what would we do differently? And those are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves as we look at this whole process that got us to this point. So with that, I will conclude my comments and we can move into executive session if that's the will of the chair of the NTMC.
Thank you very much, Chairman Watts. I could not have said that any better, and thank you for expressing your thoughts. They're mine also, and I agree with those 100%.
Joe, just to confirm, and with our chairs as well, it will take me a second to migrate everybody over that needs to be in the executive session, but I will just identify those as the DCTA voting board members, including the 2 alternates from the county, the NTMC board members and NTMC officers, legal counsel. And then we also have John Hendrickson listed on item number 2. Does he also need to be included in that closed executive session?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Is that right? Joe is.
If he's got, if we've got, let's go ahead and put him over there and we'll discuss that in there and then decide
Okay.
if we can.
Okay, sounds good.
And Lindsay, if you can also include Rusty and Amanda for the budget discussion that's included in the item number 2 as well. Thank you.
Yes, I will. Give me just one moment and I will get everybody moved over. And Chair Watts and Vice Chair Hayes, I believe you may need to hit a button in order to transfer it over to approve that. There we go. Okay, I believe we have everybody back in the main session.
Chairman Watts, did you want to start off this or do you want me to take it? Up to you, sir.
On agenda item number 2?
Yes, sir.
No, I think probably if you could just give us an overview of what we're going to be discussing here. It says receive an update from NTMC related to the collective bargaining process and general manager. So I think that's a good place to start, because then that will probably spur some conversation and give us some information that the DCTA board needs to give you some direction or give some direction to staff.
Great. All right, sir. And if anyone has any questions or things, please feel free to let us know. We're glad to address those. I'm going to try to give us a quick synopsis of this, and the fact that for the past, I believe, 9 months, we've had a contract with the Hendrickson Transportation Group to provide general management operations. And I believe we did a 6 months agreement. Correct me if I'm wrong on these days. I believe we did a 6 months agreement, and then we came back and did another 3-month extension before that contract expired, actually. And NTMC board unanimously approved all of that and everything, and everything seemed to be going fine. We did have a hiccup in that contract actually was allowed to expire. It expires today. There was no notification to anyone that it was, or to myself, that contract was going to expire until I had already been notified to other people that the contract, in fact, the Henderson Group, that it was not going to be renewed. But that being said, we have met with Henderson Group, Mr. John Hendrickson, and Mr. Hendrickson, I believe, is with us. Is that correct? Mr. Hendrickson is there. I don't see him, but I feel he is with us.
Yes, he is on.
Okay.
Mr.
Right.
Hendrickson, did you want him to say a few words?
In a few minutes.
Okay.
And so anyway, Mr. John Hendrickson, who is president of the Hendrickson Transportation Group, we did have several discussions with him. We had a meeting with him on Monday. He did present a availability item, or I shouldn't say it, a contract proposal, how we could move forward with renewing or extending or creating a new contract with the Henderson Transportation Group to keep a continuity of the bus ridership program going as far as general management goes. The consensus of the board was to take that offer from Mr. Hendrickson to DCTA to see if they thought that would be able to be funded. And so what I would like to do today is ask Mr. Hendrickson if he could give you the basically same presentation overview of how this contract would go forward. There are some questions to it at the end, as far as which I think he will address as to far our intentions going forward, notifications of contract renewals or extensions, and or if there would be some type of a change from NTMC to some other entity to provide bus service, how his organization would no longer be contracted with us. But I think he can go over those things and answer any questions anyone might have. Does any other board member have anything they'd like to add to that before we have Mr. Hendrickson give his presentation? Okay, seeing none, then Mr. Hendrickson, if you would, sir, please go ahead and inform us once again of your offer to offer general management to NTMC board.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chairman Ukert. This is John Hendrickson. Appreciate everybody's time this morning. So in discussions with the NTMC board, we were working through a way to keep management continuity and things of that nature. Mr. RJ Garza, who was the general manager there, we do have a project that he has been assigned to, so he will have to work on that project. There were some other projects that we were going to have him assigned to that we have removed him from pending what happens here. And so he's going to have to work remotely at some point in time during this contract. And so for management continuity, our recommendation is to provide a general manager and assistant general manager. We talked with the board about doing that at a rate that is, we think will be pretty close to what is already currently being paid for the assistant GM position. And we think that for us to do this, we need to look at it as a one-year term. Because we did, for the previous contract, we did move RJ all the way back down south. And so we've already done that. So we're going to have to look at how we're going to move forward and get him back up there through some short-term leases or something like that. As we worked through it, we looked at, how could we make sure that we had boots on the ground and things of that nature. And that's why we came up with the GM and the AGM position. We would look at hiring current staff member to be in the AGM position and work with them and, try to help develop them into what, we think a GM should be and try to get them some training and things like that, through our group. And then, just to continue to work through the process. We'd like to make sure that, we'd like to have a one-year contract with a 90-day notification on that contract, and then a buyout clause if it is terminated earlier. So that's kind of my presentation today. I think for management continuity and the way that we can work this and make it work out, I think it makes sense. But it's your decision, and ultimately we're here to serve based upon what you would like us to do.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I will say that over the time frame that the Henderson Group and RJ Garza, who has been in charge for the Henderson Group, being our general manager, at every board meeting, we have seen nothing but praise from the NTMC staff members at the board meetings, talking about what a great job he's done, how things are going good. We were getting monthly reports. When we did do the initial contract, we directed him to give us monthly reports at every board meeting, which he's done. It seems as though things are running very well under this. And as he mentioned, to have the continuity of going forward, as we discussed before, could be 6 months, 9 months, a year before there's any changes made, if there are any changes made. And during that time frame, I think it would be essential, and I think the board had consensus that it would be essential to keep some type of continuity going, so we don't have a disruption in our service or our employees and staff. So like he said, where you're looking at, he was talking about hiring Mr. Garza would be our general manager. And because of the fact that we did not extend the contract originally, he did make plans. He gave up his apartment that he had here, so they're going to have to come back and redo that, some type of living quarters here. Basically correct me if I'm wrong, this Mr. Henderson, but you'd stated that basically that he would be on site 65 to 70% of the time he would be here. The rest of the time he would be working remotely. However, the assistant general manager position that you were talking about, which also would be an employee of yours, would be on site 100% of the time. Well, I'm gonna say 100% of the time, because there would be some training that person would need to go through to increase their ability to become assistant general manager and be an efficient assistant general manager and possibly a general manager going forward. But other than the training, that person would be there on a full-time basis under the direction of Mr. Garza. Also, you had stated that you were willing to basically employ that assistant general manager at a basic pass-through rate of what it was costing NTMC for that person if they were an employee. There may be a few dollars more based on benefits, or a small percentage. I believe you said a 2.5% percentage for administrative fee for doing all the administration work that you do have to do for the employee. But other than that, it was pretty close to the same amount dollar-wise that it would cost NTMC to have that person in charge. You had also stated that with the new contract that you were willing to contract Mr. Garza as a general manager at the same rate at which we had on the previous contracts. And so with that, is anybody having, if you want, would you like to hear numbers on those board members? Would you like to, because I'm sure Mr. Henderson can give you not exact figures, but close estimates of what those positions would be.
And Chair,
Yeah.
yes, Chair Watts.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions that will maybe lead into a reporting of those numbers. So under our previous contract that was due to expire at the end of this month, actually today, what was the cost of that contract at DCTA that was budgeted? I mean, what was the cost of the contract that expired? Do we know?
Staff should have that information. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, so that's one question. And really, the question that comes along with that is, I believe it was extended back in October through March 31st. So I'd like to, because what I'm trying to understand is, from DCTA's perspective, from the budget perspective, that, you know, we're looking at entering into a new contract with Hendrickson that is different, or I want to know what is the difference between the new contract, which is hiring, you know, they're hiring someone else, but that also NTMC was having to pay that person as an employee. So I'm trying to get the delta, the bottom line delta of this new contract with this new position, with this 2.5% overhead with benefits compared to what we had previously, and what the historical context was of extensions and renewals previously, as far as a cost basis, because we're using this process right now, this new contract, possibly moving someone over, as a stopgap measure because of this contract expiring. And so at some point, I would like to understand, and it just may be offline, you know, when the Henderson Group was aware or thought, or who communicated to them that somehow your contract's expiring and you're done. And that way, and then they released TJ to go to someone else. But what I want to understand is, what is the financial impact of this process that we're having to go through now? Because this contract expired without any discussion on renewal. And if it's the same, it's the same. If it's more, it's more. If it's less, it's less. Because from a budgetary perspective, I think it's important for the DCTA board to understand that. So that may be where the numbers come in this regard. So like this new general manager or assistant general manager position under this third-party contractor, how much is that costing? What's the overhead? What's the total benefit package? And then if this person, my understanding is this person is or was or still is an employee of NTMC, and you know, what is their total compensation at NTMC compared to what the total compensation is going to be with the third-party contractor. And that way, you know, we can understand, and the general manager position, you know, if they're here only 65 or 70% of the time, are we paying them only 65 or 70% of what they would have made? So just to understand those numbers from a budgetary perspective.
Yes, sir. What HTG is proposing for the GM position is $14,300 a month. That is the same amount that the previous contract that expires today. It's the same monthly cost. Annualized, that's $171,600. And again, that's exactly the same as the previous contract. For the AGM position, HTG is proposing a total of $118,000, including salary and benefits for the AGM position, as well as an administrative fee for HTG. The position currently budgeted within the NTMC budget as an NTMC employee is roughly $102,000. So the delta is about $16,000. The salary itself is the same under both an AGM position under HTG and under NTMC. The main delta is in related as it relates to healthcare costs. What HTG has proposed for healthcare costs is slightly higher than what is included in the NTMC budget as an NTMC employee. And then also, of course, that administrative fee.
Do you know what that is? I mean, just roughly off the top of your head, both of those? Is it 5,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the difference in healthcare costs is roughly 7,600. And then the administrative fee comes out to just under $3,000.
Okay. And on the GM salary, you said it's the same. So I guess, and maybe John can answer this. When I hear that they're going to be either on site 70%, in other words, they're not working 100%, 40 hours a week or whatever it is for NTMC. Is that correct? Is that job description being split? In other words, his time is being split between this other project and NTMC?
No, well, let me explain it this way. He's going to be 100% committed to NTMC. He'll be able to be reached by phone and all that kind of stuff. There's just one project that he does have to work on. And so we're estimating that it's going to take 20-25% of his time and then travel time. And because we have to get another apartment up there and then the additional travel time that we're going to have to accommodate that, that's why we left the rate the same.
Okay, so there is a compensation in his rate for this other project because of the circumstances that occurred before of, well, we thought it was expiring, so we didn't know anything different. So we moved him on, and you're giving us an accommodation to help keep a sense of sort of continuity. But that continuity, there is a value that's being added in order to compensate for the additional costs that your company is experiencing with this second project.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
And Chairman Watts, if I could real quick, staff, you said that the cost for the health insurance difference, or I won't say health, but the benefits difference was 7,600, and the cost for the administrative fee was 3,000. So that's 10,600. Yet you said there was a $16,000 difference. Where's the $5,000?
There's also roughly $3,900 more included in the HTG proposal related to a retirement match that is different from what is currently budgeted within the NTMC budget, as well as $1,700 under the disability and life insurance category.
And those are differences from what we were paying as to
Those
what?
are additional increases. Yes, sir.
Okay. And would you go over those last two again? I'm sorry, the life and the health and the other, please.
Yes, 7,600 for health benefits. I presume that includes medical, dental, and vision. That's the number that that we compared to on the NTMC budget side. 3,900 for retirement match or retirement contributions. 1,700 for disability and life insurance. And then the 2,900 for the HTG administrative fee.
Okay. Mr. Henriksen, does that pretty much follow what you're seeing?
Well, I'm not aware of her actual numbers and what her benefits package is. I was just putting her in with what our benefits package is. And so based upon our benefits package, as a private company, our rates may be a little bit higher on healthcare, but we do have a good healthcare plan. As far as retirement goes, we provide 6% to the retirement side of things. And then we provide life insurance policy, accidental death and dismemberment and long-term disability. So that's probably what those differences are. And our administration fee is we have our third-party administrator for the 401k. Then of course we have payroll and all those different things. And so that's why we do the 2.5%.
Okay, great. So if we could, I guess it's Marissa that's doing this, could you give the NTMC staff and the DCTA staff, they wanted the breakdown of our costs for those entities, what we're currently paying for those entities? Because it would be the same for all employees, I take it, correct?
Well,
Chair-
what we have budgeted for each employee is based on that individual employee's elections.
So Chair Euchre, I've got a real quick question, a general question, if I may.
Sure.
Given this delta, I guess my question is, I don't know really how else to ask it. Why are we doing it this way? Why is this person not just remaining an employee of NTMC and not being an employee of the Hendrickson Group? I mean, I don't understand that, because I mean, if they're going to be performing the same function, in essence, why are we? Why would DCTA, and I'm not saying this in the sense that I'm either for or against it, it's just sort of a question. What's the rationale to move someone to a different place, pay them maybe the same salary but better benefits, when where they are right now is an employee of NTMC, and they're basically going to be, my understanding is, doing the same thing, maybe a little bit. So what, I don't understand the rationale.
And I'd be happy to let Mr. Henderson address some of that, but I think some of it is actually that we are doing this contract for Henderson Group to do management, oversee and be in charge of management of the bus operation portion of it. And basically what we've looked at is talked about, and I think that was consensus of the board also, that we go back when we do this and have the general manager report directly to the board. And with that AGM, then that person would report not to NTMC staff, but they would report to the GM. And Henderson Group would also be providing the AGM with needed training to update them how to be that management position. And when I say that, I'll let Mr. Henderson kind of add to that. Mr. Henderson, if you kind of explain that a little bit better, please, sir.
Well, and this is John Hendrickson again. So what we do at HTG, we try to develop people, and we try to develop them in a way that they understand the current federal rules, the regulations, all those types of things. We work with them on, writing skills, and get them to understand, how to move forward with dealing with boards and all those kind of good things. And so all those things we're going to bring to the table. We're going to work with them. We're going to get them engaged in some things with, TTA, with SWATA, and then of course with APTA, so that they have some opportunities there to kind of understand the transit industry as a whole a little bit better. We do this with all of our staff and anybody that we bring on board. We try to develop them to be, the best fit that we can for projects throughout the country. And we try to make them great general managers and have a good understanding of not only operations, but also the political side of everything and all of that. And so I think that's something that we would bring to the board for the AGM spot. But for management continuity purposes, and because RJ won't have boots on the ground, all the time, for us, it makes sense to have somebody that reports to us. So not only do they report to RJ, but then they report to me as well. And so we can make sure that we have our ear to the ground and we're taking care of business. And if there's an emergency, there's some opportunity for them to call and get help, and we can send resources as needed to assist with that. But that's one of the reasons. And for me, it's as a former drill sergeant, I always believe that when you have a direct report, it makes it easier to help them grow and all of that kind of stuff. But not only that, but also they have a clear chain of command of who they report to and how they report. And so that, I think, just for management continuity purposes, makes it easier. It makes it better for everybody involved. And so there's not somebody pulling at their strings on the NTM side, telling them to do one thing, we're telling them to do another thing. And if RJ is going to report directly to the NTMC board, when he gets direction, he can make sure that that direction, it flows through the organization the way it's supposed to, through the AGM, and it's all consistent and, moving forward.
And I will say, Chairman Watts, on that, staff, when we did this 9 months ago, staff brought to us, it was probably 10 months ago before we did it, but staff brought to us a recommendation to enter into this contract with Henderson Group. And in that, they listed all their qualifications. They were high on them, thought they were excellent. They did their background. They've worked with Austin. They've worked with all different cities that provide transportation, public transportation, and that is their bailiwick, basically. And so with that, they made this recommendation. They sang high praises of that. And during this 9 months that we've had them on board, we've heard nothing but high praises from staff on that. Even so, to add to that, they felt confident when we got thrown into a situation that we bring them in on our collective bargaining agreement, which we'll go over here in a little bit. But the confidence of that group, I think, is what we are looking for continuity going forward in management.
Oh, don't misinterpret my question isn't about questioning their performance, because obviously NTMC has been satisfied and pleased with their performance. DCTA has provided the budget to do that. I'm just trying to understand, how is this different than what we were doing before? So I heard you say, John, that, chain of command and all those kinds of things, but I presume that before this current contract expired, that if this individual who works at NTMC had an issue, they would go to the general manager to talk about it. And there wouldn't be any kind of, well, I'm a third party person, you're an employee, we've got, to me, it would be seamless. So I'm just having a difficulty. Well, I know how we got here. Okay, so I know how we got here. I'm just trying to say, it looks like we're going to be paying a little bit more money because this person's moving over to your corporate. And hey, people can go to work where they want to go to work. That's just, obviously, that's the great thing about our state, is we're an at-will employer. So I'm just trying to understand that this new paradigm, what it's going to cost us, and what more benefit it's going to give DCTA from a budgetary perspective and working with NTMC than what the previous one that we had in place.
Chairman,
So obviously we're not talking about much money, but I think it's the process that is important to me, and how we get to these places and how we resolve these places.
Chairman, I'd like to, if I may, respond or make a comment, please.
Sure.
All right, thank you. I agree that the assistant general manager could continue as a DCTA employee. As we discussed this item at the NTMC board meeting, and as I've mentioned before, when we originally set up the structure, it was under a lot of different assumptions about how things would operate. I do believe that there would be benefit for the general manager, assistant general manager, to have a consistent reporting structure. I don't think that that's inconsistent. Can it continue the way it is so that we don't incur the $16,000? Yes. Is there opportunity for improving the process and the organizational structure? Yes. If we're going to continue this organization for another year, we have taken on a lot of additional initiatives at DCTA we need to focus on, strategic priorities that didn't exist when we structured this originally. And it has put a strain, I think, on the staff to try to support both organizations as we've added more transition strategy, implementation of MOS. Those things were not contemplated when we originally set this up. But I don't disagree that, and it's a very good point, that it doesn't have to change. It could certainly continue the way it is. I do believe that there's an opportunity to improve the reporting structure, other things that we'll discuss at NTMC in the future. So I think that there was consistent agreement that this would potentially help the reporting and communication between the organizations. And so that's why it was proposed by Hendrickson. And I just wanted to add those comments. Thank you.
I guess my final question is, the individual that is the assistant, proposed to be the assistant general manager with the Hendrickson Group. What is their title currently with NTMC? What is their job title?
It's interim general manager.
Okay. So then if they stayed at NTMC, would that title change, or would that still, I mean, would that have to change?
I think it would for consistency, it would be assistant general manager.
The same as what they're looking at?
Yeah, I would ask for Nicole or Christina to respond because I've not been in those conversations, but it's my understanding that she's in an interim role. It was not a role that was promised as the general manager. It was interim general manager, but that's the knowledge that I have.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. All right.
And
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Hayes has his hand raised.
Thank you. What is the salary for the interim general manager position?
It is 80,000.
Say that again, please.
80,000.
Okay, thank you. And then what would be the cost of all the other cost of having an employee, the benefits and other things for that position?
Within the NTMC budget, there's an additional 22,000 for benefits and associated employer taxes.
Okay. And as I understand it, we had a general manager. The reason we're having these discussions, he vacated that position in February 2020. So we had an option then, just as we do today. Do we do it internally or do we contract it out? At that time, staff recommended that we contract it out, hire the Hendrickson Transportation Group. And that's how we ended up with that organization that's done a good job. With that said, prior, when we just had a general manager in-house, was there an AGM position?
Yes.
Okay. And so where I'm going with this is the business model we've had is we've had a general manager and assistant general manager. So if we have an interim general manager, is the thinking because of the workload, and I appreciate your comments, Raymond, about all the duties that y'all have. We would have to backfill that position. That is, if the AGM moves to the interim general manager, we would need to bring in some help because that person can't do two jobs if we did this internally.
I mean, that's standard when you look at most transit agencies because of the hours of operations. It's not an 8 to 5. We're usually spanning 18 hours. There has been an assistant general manager and general manager prior to NTMC with First Transit. I think it's logical that you'd expect that the level of effort would require some backfill. Now, whether if it's privatized and they want to give them different job descriptions, they can, but typically the workload is somewhat split between those two positions.
Okay. And when the prior general manager was here, what was his total compensation cost, salary and benefits, if we have that number?
I'm sorry, are you asking for the general manager before RJ was serving in that role?
Yes, ma'am. What I was trying to get back to Mayor Watt's question is what's the delta under if we do it internally, we have two positions and some cost. If we do it externally, we're going to have 2 positions and cost. So I was trying to get what that difference is, contracting it, outside the Henderson Transportation Group as compared to if we did it internally.
I don't have historical information about how that position was previously budgeted.
Okay, what is staff's thinking in regards to if we went from interim general manager, what that cost would be? I mean, where I'm going with this is I think the difference is relatively small, but I don't know. I don't know the numbers. That's why I'm trying to ask the questions.
Well, I see, I understand now where you're going, Board Member Hayes. I think the challenge and why, just from a historical decision perspective, it was going to be very challenging, assuming that this transition was going to transpire, because we've been talking about moving towards a different model for quite some time. To try to hire a person in-house for a short period of time on salary was going to be challenging. And I think that's why the recommendation a while back was we should contract it until we know what we're going to do moving forward. I agree with you that when you look at the cost, typically contracting out looks more expensive, but by the time you burden it with wages and benefits and some overhead from a contractor, it is a bit more expensive. It's usually, I mean, I don't know an exact number, but it would be anywhere from about 15 to 25% more expensive when you contract out a position. That position has been in our budget as a position that needs to be funded, whether it be contracted or not. I'm not sure I'm answering your exact question, but I think earlier Marissa suggested that the total difference, since the general manager is already looked like a wash, that the total difference between the GM, AGM was about $16,000 impact to the budget.
Okay, that helps me. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
And to that, I think, this is Chairman Euchre again, I think if we move forward with this continuity of a general manager and an assistant general manager who are all reporting to the same entity, and then all of those people employed below them will report to that same general entity, I think there may be some other ways of saving in budget wise that we can look at that they may not need it. As of right now, there are several DCTA employees that are being compensated or paid for under the NTMC plan, because I'm sure that some of their hours get charged to NTMC. I may be wrong. I've never seen that. I don't know how that works. We've never been informed of how that works. But if you got a DCTA employee and they work 20 hours a week for NTMC business, as you just heard Marissa doing a lot of stuff, right? Does 20 hours of her time get charged to NTMC, or does the full 40 hours of her time get charged to DCTA? I don't know how that works, but I think that's something we should look at. And then that cost savings, I think there could be a possibility of restructuring the management side of it, not so much the management side as far as the bus operation itself, but the other portion that we're getting from DCTA employees currently.
Chair Euchre, if I can just clarify for the record, all of the DCTA employee staff time and expenses is recorded as DCTA expenses. I serve as the CFO for DCTA, but I also serve as the treasurer for NTMC. The ILA between DCTA and NTMC includes that DCTA will provide accounting, financial, administrative services for NTMC. And so that includes processing of payments on behalf of NTMC, preparing NTMC financials that are included in your packet every month. No DCTA staff gets any additional compensation for our role or duties related to NTMC, nor are any of those expenses included as an NTMC expense. All of that is housed within the DCTA budget.
Okay, great. I didn't know that, but I'd never been informed that. To me, that's DCTA's bailiwick, but well, I would want to know how much time my staff that I'm paying is spending towards DCTA and how much time are they spending towards NTMC? Because then you can make some conscious decisions, informed decisions on what staff we need to have or need to reduce or need to add. But most businesses I've seen operate under that premise that you direct an amount of time to a certain position and then you adjust your budget based on the amount of time given to that position. But that's your bailiwick. So thank you for that information, Marissa. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And I would like to add that all of those costs would end up being passed through. So if it were to be allocated to NTMC versus DCTA, ultimately it comes out of the DCTA budget in the end. So it ends up being, I think, a wash in the end. If you were to allocate NTMC officer time to DCTA versus NTMC.
And because NTMC is a local government corporation that is fully funded by DCTA, our accounting guidance from our external auditors was that we shouldn't be recording expenses between the two entities for that exact reason, that it's all funded by DCTA. So all of the salaries and benefits that are included in the NTMC budget are solely related to NTMC employees.
Okay.
And this is a much larger discussion that'll need to be had.
Agreed.
As we look at what reality looks like after we implement some of the other services, there's a lot of discussion that needs to be had with regard to process. The local government corp was originally intended and set up to share services to make it more efficient. And to the points that have been made several times today, we've had the existing staff take on the additional responsibilities to support this local government corp. Certainly understand the comment. I do believe that we tend to run, we always have under budget because we're managing the budget. I'm talking NTMC as well. I don't know that this is going to require a budget revision to add the $16,000 if the boards choose to move in this direction.
Mr. Chair, Director Gilmore has his hand raised.
And I apologize. I do have a meeting that's going to be coming up, so I'm going to have to hand this off to Kristen. But I wanted to make just a couple of quick points for our NTMC board members. And thank you, Mr. Suarez, for going back to the original origin of NTMC. NTMC was founded for two specific reasons. Number one, transparency of budgeting. So when we enter a contract, that doesn't get tied up. And that is absolutely the number one best purpose for LGCs is transparency in government contracting. I think it's amazing. I think it absolutely has to continue however we deal with it. So thank you guys for that. The other reason that NTMC was created, and I have actually the original presentation, was that it was going to create a cost savings for the organization by bringing everything in-house. And over the years, that has changed. That language has changed. So it's no longer bringing a cost savings. So that's definitely a concern as we get into the conversations. And I have that PowerPoint presentation if anybody wants to see it. But let's just be clear, things like budgets and salary costs on this, it shouldn't be a gut feeling of how many hours we feel. Y'all should know that. The budget and dollars for that shouldn't be a feeling of how it's allocated. It should be allocated. So that really concerns me when I have DCTA staff telling me, well, we feel that this is this way. I can hear it from the board members here today. We should know. I mean, the question of how much more is this going to cost us, that should have been in backup material. That's all I have.
Well, thank you. And I agree with both of you. As Member Suarez said, I regress. I probably shouldn't have brought that issue up. That's an issue to talk about at a later date as far as that side of it. And to Member Gilmore's point, we are running long on time. I know everybody is.
Yeah, and I have another meeting I'm supposed to be on right now, but so.
Right. And we still have to do the collective bargaining agreement. So does anyone else have any discussion or anything on the general management operation of NTMC?
This, Richard, bottom line would be if there is an additional cost, are there funds available? Did the DCTA board see those dollars being available for us to proceed with contracting with Henderson Transportation Group?
And Vice Chair Hayes, I apologize if we didn't explicitly say that before, but yes, to mirror what Raymond just said, we do believe that that additional $16,000 can be accommodated within the existing NTMC budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So direction from DCTA on the general management operation going forward.
So, and I guess that's my question. What are we posted for in giving direction? I mean, what is it exactly is this agenda item asking the DCTA board for?
And this is Joe Graffito. Let me jump in. It was direction as it related to the impact on the DCTA's budget. But what I'm hearing, and Marissa, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there would be no impact on the NTMC budget, this additional funding. So DCTA does not have to kind of give a thumbs up, if you will, to move additional funds over to NTMC for this contract, correct?
Correct. As the NTMC officer, we believe that this can be accommodated within the existing NTMC budget.
Does that help? Chairman
Yes.
Watt? Okay.
Without additional funding from DCTA.
Okay, all right. So it's not costing the DCTA budget anything.
Correct.
All right. So do you need direction on that? I mean, are we supposed to give direction on, okay, move forward with it? Is that, or do we even need to?
Well,
I
think the NTMC board can decide whether they want to move forward or not. We just want to make sure that there was going to be the funds there from DCTA to make our decision.
Yeah. So since we're not providing any funds, there's really no decision DCTA has to make. Is that, Joe, is that?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Great. So now we move to the collective bargaining agreement. Okay, I'll try to give you a quick synopsis of that. Once again, John Hendrickson of Hendrickson Transportation Group, and I hope he's still here with us, was contracted by staff, not by board, but by staff, to be the lead negotiator on our collective bargaining agreement. I think he has some good information for you to hear. I would like to let Mr. Hendrickson present that information to you and open up to any questions or concerns we might have.
Dean, this is Richard. Before you start, according to the agenda, it says adjourn DCTA board and continuation of NTMC board. So I didn't know if DCTA really wanted to do that, or they're, of course, obviously welcome to stay.
We still have, Board Member Hayes, we still have in item 2, we still have update from NTMC related to the collective bargaining process under item number 2.
Okay, thank you.
So,
And I believe, if I'm correct, Councilor Profita, this could possibly incur some additional funding from DCTA.
yeah, we'll let John Hendrickson address that issue. Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Hendrickson, are you there, sir?
Yes, I'm here. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, for the CBA, we entered into this thing thinking that the negotiations were going to take a long time to get done, but I never said that we would get the impasse, and I always told them that I wanted to get an agreement. Kept working through it, and we ended up starting negotiations on March 23rd, continued through March 24th, and then approximately about 1 o'clock in the morning on the 25th, we actually got an agreement, a tentative agreement on all 42 articles. Management proposed about 30 different proposals, with 4 of them being global proposals. The union had 12 proposals, 2 of them being new articles for inclusion. We worked through the majority of those things throughout the process. We kind of aligned everything with current federal rules as far as part-time, full-time. We did work to remove seasonal employees. That's one of the things that I think the public comment was about. So in the new union agreement, there will be no seasonal employees. Everybody will be full-time, part-time. We rejected some of their, the biggest thing is they wanted a 10% increase in salaries. We worked to reject that a number of times. They wanted a state of emergency. So anytime a state of emergency was declared, that there'd be pay and benefits for transit operators. And so we of course rejected that as management's right. And then they wanted a successor clause. We worked through that as well. They wanted to eliminate part-time operators, which we did not agree with. And then they wanted 3 additional holidays. We worked through all of those different things, and most of those things were rejected. The things that we did provide to them were, and these are the main financial points that I want to explain to the board, is that for 2021, we worked with them to get a 4% increase in 2021, a 3% in 2022, and a 3% in 2023. When you compare that across some of the other negotiations that have happened, like in Austin, they did about an 8% increase across the board for each year of their contract. So I think we were very reasonable in what we did. So those things made sense to me. And of course, based upon the budget numbers, those looked fairly reasonable. We looked at 401k. They wanted us to give 10% once again, as I said earlier, but we worked with them to negotiate down to a 3% match for 401k contributions, but that's only for operators who participate. And so, operators will have to contribute up to 6% to get that 3%. And then we will match 50 cents on the dollar up to that 3%. And then the company agreed, rather than adding additional holidays of, whether it's, I don't know, President's Day, some of those other holidays that are out there, we just worked with them to provide 1 floating holiday per year. And so an employee can choose to have that on their anniversary date of when they were hired, or their birthday, or whatever the case is, but they do have to schedule it and follow all procedures for use of that 1 holiday. And then, so looking at it as on a whole, we figured all of those things out is what it would cost. And so it's going to be about $270,700 per year. That's the average of each year. So the first year will be a little less than that. And of course, the third year it will be a little bit more than that. But overall, that's with 100% participation in the 401k program, and NTMC providing a complete 3% match for all employees. Normally that doesn't happen. If you see a participation rate, generally of a system this size, you're probably looking at 30%. And so of that 270,000, about 100,000 is for 401k. If you look at it from that perspective, 30% of that would be about $30,000 and not $100,000. So that would bring you down to about 200,000 per year average. Overall, I think negotiations went well. I was not expecting negotiations to, I figured we would reach impasse and then have to come back, and it would be a prolonged process, but we just kept working through it. I never gave them any indications that we were going to quit negotiating or get to an impasse. And so they were a little tired, and finally, I think they just gave in to some of the things that we'd asked for. And I think overall it went really well. I was proud of the team that was there. We worked through it, we made things happen, and that's my report to the board, and I'll answer any questions y'all may have.
Does anyone have questions or comments on the proposed agreement?
Yeah, I've got just a couple. This is Chair Watts. So I guess when we look at other agencies similar to ours, which there's not very many, how does this stack up? So what I'm hearing you say is the delta, the additional cost to this agreement over last year's agreement was 270,000 or whatever, something changed. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Average of this thing, if you're full at the full financial exposure, which would be the 401k, all participants, it'd be about $270,000.
Okay.
And that's assuming, can I make?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
And that's assuming that all employees that are currently involved stay involved. And so they progress through the seniority level and their pay raises increase accordingly. There's not a transit system out there that happens, so it would reduce that as well. But this is your maximum exposure that we're looking at.
Okay. And how does the UNT contract, and this may be a Raymond question, or DCTA staff question, how does, because basically, depending on how our VIA proposal goes and, you know, moving towards more on demand for some of the connect routes in Louisville and Denton, most likely, most of the fixed bus routes will be with the UNT contract. So do we need to then look at the UNT contract to see how that squares up with the additional cost? And that may be beyond the scope of this discussion. I just sort of put that out there so that we can understand exactly how that works. So
yes, if I can,
yes,
Mayor Watts, we need to look at, from DCTA's perspective, it's what does it take to provide all transit services? In this case, we're looking at all bus services because
right.
Union members can mark up on whatever routes they choose to work on. I think the results, as I understood them from the Hendrickson Transportation Group, is that the results of the conversations between the union representatives and John and the team resulted in a financial increase that's not it's not out of round, if you will, with what you would expect to see with, even as you think from one year to the next, we tend to budget for a percentage of increase for salary and wages and benefits. I don't believe, based on the numbers that I'm hearing from John, that it would impact our budget in FY21. And then as we bring clarity from our other discussions today, as we have more clarity around what the future looks like, the expectation would be that it would not impact our financials in a negative way if the DCTA board were to be supportive of the existing proposal that's being presented by John and his team.
Okay. One question I had that I just thought of as you were talking, Raymond, when we were talking about financial impact on DCTA, and it's a real quick question going back to the general manager contract, because I remember someone had mentioned a buyout clause, that it somehow, if there was a term of the contract that wanted to be extinguished early, that there was a buyout clause. And so, Marissa, I had heard you say that based upon the contract as it was written, that the NTMC budget could absorb the additional costs for the assistant general manager and all those kinds of things, that it didn't require any money. Does that statement ring true? Because I don't even know, nobody even mentioned what a buyout clause would cost or what the proposed buyout clause was. So does that ring true for if there is a buyout clause, or would that require DCTA to budget additional funds? And if so, what are the terms of the buyout clause? Not that I'm trying to negotiate them, I'm trying to understand what would be that exposure, if any.
Sure, I'll defer to Joe on the specifics of the buyout clause. My references to accommodating within the budget were solely related to the next 6 months that are within the FY21 budget, meaning that we do not need a budget amendment. So in the event that there was a buyout clause that would be exercised during FY21. Again, I don't know the specifics of that buyout clause to be able to say whether or not that could be accommodated within the budget. That's something that we would have to look at. But in the vein of process, that as of right now, based on our understanding of the contract, it would not require a budget amendment for FY21. And then obviously in future budget years, we would include those costs.
Yep.
While we're on the subject, likewise with the CBA, want to explicitly say, based on John's estimates for both the wage table increases and the 401k max exposure, again, based on that 6 months, assuming this would go into effect April 1, and the FY21 budget would then end September 30th, these amounts can also be accommodated within the FY21 budget without an additional budget amendment.
Okay.
Now, to be very clear, all I'm saying is that this is included within the existing NTMC budget, the DCTA funds. It's still additional costs that DCTA is going to incur. It just means that we already have some of this budgeted. So I just want to be very clear in terms of it's like these are additional costs that DCTA will incur to fund, but it doesn't require an additional budget amendment.
And this
Yeah,
is
so basically what you're saying is we've got excess budget in the NTMC budget that if we didn't have these costs, then it would, I don't know where it'd come back to. It'd either come back to DCTA or I'm not sure how that's handled, but yes, so it is costing DCTA. We're just not having to make which that's a very good distinction because it's really a process distinction and not a financial distinction. So it is costing DCTA more money because we're not saving that money.
Correct.
But we just don't have to go through the process of the budget amendment to make it all sort of shore up with accounting principles and things such as that.
Correct. Yes. There's several categories within the NTMC budget that, based on position vacancies and that sort of thing, we have some cost savings that can be utilized for some of these costs.
I appreciate that. I appreciate
Yes,
that
sir.
clarification. Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, Joe.
No, that's okay. I wanted to reference back to the question that you asked on the buyout clause. And just so all the board members know, we've not inked a contract with John Hendrickson yet or seen all of the deal points. But my understanding, and the NTMC board can weigh in here also, but my understanding from our previous conversations is John was looking for basically a 90-day notice or 90-day buyout clause in the contract. And John's on here and he can chime in if he disagrees.
Well, I don't know if I need to know the specific. I guess now I'm a little confused because what I'm hearing is we don't know what the total cost of this new contract is going to be. We know the salaries, we know these other kinds of things, but the contract hasn't been finalized. The terms haven't been finalized. So we don't really know what the total cost is going to be. So we don't technically know whether the NTMC budget can absorb it unless we just have so much excess that we're confident that it's going to be able to absorb it.
That's fair. And to be fair, I presumed that any buyout clause would just be at max exposure the remaining term of the contract. So based on the 14,300 and then the AGMP, that total contract value of it's roughly 290,000.
And that's a reasonable.
I assumed there wouldn't be any additional penalty, and that's the number that I was going off.
Okay.
Right, and I'd just like to add that if we're, based on the earlier conversation today, if let's say we're 9 months into a 1-year agreement, I think what John was looking for was the 90-day notice. So those next 90 days would be compensation because he's taking risks to bring these people on, to dedicate them to our contract. And so he was looking for notice. I don't want to put words into John's mouth, but that's what I recall from the board meeting that we had.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, Director Costa's hand is raised.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so Marissa, I just want to clarify too, and this may be semantics, that it's not that these extra costs were in the budget, it's that the budget can absorb it because of the budget savings we currently have.
Yes, ma'am. We have several position vacancies within NTMC, as well as some, we budget conservatively in some areas when we have vacant positions going into the budget. I had previously said we budget specifically based on each employee's election. So for vacant positions, we budget at the max, most expensive election that a person may elect. But then if they come in and request, only employee only versus family, we have cost savings in terms of those areas as well. And so between that and position vacancies is where we have savings that can be utilized for this.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, wow. I didn't expect those kudos. I guess it's, as NTMC board, we've really been doing a great job since we've made all these cost savings over this time period that we're able to absorb these amounts. I'm just kidding. We appreciate what staff has done during this time to help us with these cost savings. However, back to what you were talking about, the 90-day thing. Basically, what Mr. Hendrickson, I'm not sure if he's still in there or not. If you are, please speak up if I'm incorrect, and Joe, you can too. But what I think he was saying is we don't want to happen now, not 6 months, 9 months, a year from now, what has just happened to cause all this. So he is basically saying that we would need to give them a 90-day notice if we are not going to renew that contract. If we don't do it in that 90 days, then that contract gets renewed or extended. And that's to prevent something happening. That's just what happened where he moved people out, didn't think it was going to happen. And also, like he said, the buyout clause would also give them that 90 days. So I think Marissa is correct in assuming that even with the buyout clause, the total exposure would not be more than the full year's contract. And Mr. Graffita or Mr. Hendrickson, y'all can address that differently if you think that's different.
This is John Henderson. Just to explain, we're here to help. We're not here to take advantage of anything. I think the thing is we're going to be required to sign a lease and some other things to move an employee back up there. That lease will be based upon, what are the terms that we can negotiate. And it's very difficult sometimes to get a month-to-month lease. And so that'll be a little bit of a challenge for us. And so, if something happens and y'all have to close that out, then we're going to have expenses beyond the contract term. And so we're going to have to absorb those costs. And so and then also I have to take care of the employees that we're going to assign to this contract. We have contracts currently that we could assign them to, but there in the future, there may be some dead time and things like that. And so I've got to keep them employed and take care of their overall needs. And so that's what I wanted to explain. And so that's why there would be a buyout on the contract. And then as far as the 90 days, we just would like to have 90 days notice if the contract's going to renew or not. If we don't get any notice, then we would assume that the contract's going to renew so we don't face the same situation again.
Great, thank you, sir.
No, I understand that. Yeah. So then for a summary, what you're looking, so I want to make sure I understood. So we've got the management contract that can be absorbed in the current budget of that whatever it was, the 200 and something thousand for the collective bargaining agreement. You're looking for direction from DCTA
to fund that.
You're on mute.
Mayor, somehow it got muted.
Sorry about that. Is there money in the NTNC budget to absorb the collective bargaining agreement additional costs?
For the 6 month period based on John's estimates, yes, within the FY21 budget. And then as we work through the FY22 budget, those additional costs can be captured in the FY22 budget. But yes, the FY21 budget can accommodate the 6 months between April 1st when the CBA would go into effect and then September 30th.
So then the question for DCTA board is, we don't really have, unless we're willing to say we want to reduce those costs and we don't want to do that, we don't really have a decision to make from a budget amendment perspective until FY 2022. When we reformulate the budget for NTMC, and then these costs, you know, they have to be included in that. But for now, unless we have an objection to the sort of dollar costs of the increase, the DCTA board has no action to take except because we're not doing a budget amendment, unless we say we don't agree with those costs, but yet we've already funded them if they're being absorbed. So I'm not even sure how that works process-wise, because that's really an NTMC board decision, I think, on how those funds get spent if they're excess funds. But I don't know the legalities of all that. So do we
That's
need
correct.
to make any decisions? Is that correct, Joe?
You are correct, because again, you're looking to NTMC to provide that bus service. The collective bargaining agreement is there. So if those funds are there for whatever that additional costs are going to be, those funds are there for them to spend, not for DCTA to kind of get into their business as it relates to the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, so I have then a process question in retrospect.
Okay.
I think it would have been helpful in the beginning of this agenda item number 2, if this principle would have been laid out that said, look, we're going to present you with some cost increases for a contract and for a collective bargaining agreement. Those cost increases can be absorbed within the NTMC budget. And those cost increases and whether they're absorbed in the NTMC budget is solely at the discretion and the authority of the NTMC board. In other words, if a budget amendment is not required, the DCTA board has basically no say in any of this. So that this agenda item probably could have been pretty quick if I'd have known that there was money in the budget, NTMC budget, to absorb it through 2021 through the end of this budget cycle, and that the DCTA board had no authority to say you can't spend that much money because it's your budget. This conversation would have gone a little bit differently. So just for future, maybe just some education on that money was there. It's solely the discretion of the NTMC board whether they spend it or not, and that the DCTA board, now if it had gone over, if the NTMC budget did not have that capacity, then the DCTA board had a decision to make. But if it had the capacity, so Joe, I want to make sure I'm understanding, because if I'm not, then I've just talked for 3 minutes and wasted my precious air energy. So if that money is in that budget and that can be absorbed, that's solely the purview of the NTMC board to make that decision on whether to reallocate those additional budget savings to those costs through the end of this budget year.
Correct, because that is their budget.
Okay.
And I this item was placed on here last week, not knowing probably exactly where we would be with both of those costs.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
And Joe, let me ask a process question as well. Theoretically, we've identified that there is savings within the NTMC budget. Because DCTA approves the funding to the NTMC budget, theoretically, the DCTA board could say, no, we want to recapture that savings and not utilize it for anything else, thereby reducing the transfer that DCTA makes to the NTMC budget. Is that something within the realm of
Possibilities?
Possibilities.
Yes, theoretically, yes, it is.
Okay.
And we also have to keep in mind that on the NTMC side, depending on where those cost savings are and how they're categorized, and I don't know how the budget is, where those are, we may have to do a budget amendment on the NTMC side. But that, again, that's an NTMC issue.
You mean transferring between categories?
Correct.
Sure.
Well, and because this is a 3-year agreement, and as John had laid out, there were a couple of items that are not currently funded through NTMC and or DCTA 401k match, things like that, that could have an impact in future years. But again, because there's a lot of decisions that need to be made over the course of the next year, I think the money should be there in the budget. And I say should because it depends on what decisions are made by the DCTA board and the direction that we want to go with regard to operations. So while it doesn't have an impact in this year's financial plan or budget, those were new items. That's why I believe the NTMC board was interested in sharing those items with the DCTA board and make sure that if it comes up next year in FY22 budget, that it's not, that there's no, people being blindsided by the fact that a decision was made to include a 401k match.
So Joe, I have a question.
This is Sarah. Can you hear?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Can you hear?
I can hear you.
Sarah, we can hear you. It's breaking
I
up.
had to go and get in my car to head to another meeting, but okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so
Well, no, it sounds like you're on a
and I need
harpsichord
to
or
say
something.
this because, and it's not pointing, it's not pointing the finger. Okay, go ahead, Mayor, and then I'll see if I can.
No, we can hear you. Go ahead, Sarah. We can hear you. Yeah.
So here's my heartburn, even though I think we have a direction we need to go to. So I'm just saying that up front. We have a direction that we can take. And I think we all pretty much agree that's a good direction to go. But we are in this position for the reason that, and I understand that someone can take action. There is a question about to what extent and for how much money. And I guess from my personal and professional experience, these are kinds of decisions, no matter if you have the authority, that you want to run through your board. So I have to say this, and that is, while I know we have a direction forward and I am supportive,
We lost you. We lost you there for a minute.
Even, the fact that money is sitting there because the staff did such a good job of savings does not mean that it's just, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
How about now? So the only thing I'm trying to say is just because the money's there and we were good stewards of the money,
We lost you, Sarah.
money.
We lost you, Sarah.
It's
You said we were
always
good.
important, I believe, when you're making decisions, whether it's your a board that that's it. I just needed to make that point.
Go ahead.
I'm finished. I just wanted, yeah, I'm finished. I just wanted to make that point. I know we have a direction. I'm supportive of the direction, but I don't think we should have been in this position to have to take this direction.
I agree.
That's it.
I agree.
finished.
And you did good. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it, ma'am. And I agree with what Sarah is saying. And I think the actions we're taking today, while I will take it upon myself, I should have got with Councilor Graffita and started this off with the fact that we didn't know when we posted this meeting, but we did know basically Monday that what our proposal was going to be for both items would be, we do have money in our NTMC budget to use. So we will have to redirect that money or make a budget, amendments to it so that we can move money from one place to another to cover those, but that there was money there. We should address that. I'll take that as my fault for not doing that. But we want to make sure that this does not happen going forward, that we, as Sarah just mentioned, that we're fully informed and know what's happening and how it's going on as a board, so that we can make sure that when we come to these situations, we have full involvement with DCTA and the entire board staff. I see, it looks like Member Costa has her hand raised. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah, and so Dean, you just addressed something that I was going to say. Please don't apologize for that. I was going to say before Marissa said that there was still a possibility based on if there wasn't enough money that DCTA would have known. But if we're talking about miscommunication, lack of communication, I so appreciate you having these items on the agenda for DCTA to hear and participate. Because I think that, you know, if that's what we're saying we're missing, this really, really helped. Whether you had enough money in the budget or not, I think it was an extremely great process today. So I wanted to thank you for that.
You're welcome. So has anybody else got anything else? It sounds like what Sarah said, we do have basically a good direction to go from NTMC board and from DCTA board as to what we're looking for. As I wasn't sure who brought it out, but this is a 3-year contract that we are doing in the collective bargaining agreement. And while she said we have the money in the 2021 budget right now to cover that, you're going to have 2.5 more years of that contract as long as we remain in the bus service business. If we go out of business, it's just like a union contractor, and I'm a carpenter and I'm a member of the union carpentry, and I go out of business, well, then I'm not employing any more union employees, so there's no more to be done. But if we stay in the bus service business, then we'll have to abide by this contract going forward.
Chair, I have a real quick question.
Yes.
Probably for Joe, it's a process question. Because the final terms of the contract for the Henderson Group they have not been finalized. What is the interplay between, and specifically for this, but maybe just a general question, when there are contracts that are being negotiated by NTMC, specific contracts, specific terms and dollars, and DCTA is going to be funding those contracts, what type of input does DCTA have in those specific terms? In other words, does NTMC come back with once they get sort of an agreed upon set of contract terms to run those by DCTA with the associated costs? I'm going to say for approval, because if we're approving the costs of the terms, then that means we're approving the terms. So do we see those final terms before they get fully executed?
No, no, you don't. And remember, NTMC has not really executed that many contracts to this point. So what NTMC, the contracts they've been executing have been obviously between NTMC and, for instance, John Hendrickson, and you're seeing the number. You're seeing what that number is. You're not seeing the actual or involved in the negotiations of the contract. So if that's something that DCTA wants, if they want to start seeing the terms of the contracts, that's something that we'd have to have that discussion in the process. Don't really even know if that's necessary at this point, just because of the few number of contracts that NTMC is entering into.
But we would be, we would have the opportunity if we've got like we discussed today, we had an additional increase in the general manager contract and the collective bargaining, and they broke down for us what those costs entailed. So that's sort of.
Yeah, you hold the control because you have the money.
Right.
Without the money, they can't enter into the contract.
Okay. All right. Okay. I appreciate that. That's helpful.
Anyone else have any comments or questions or anything before we, actually, I guess we would look at adjourning this joint session, and then the NTMC board would convene into their own session. Do you want to have any comments or anything before that? Mayor Watts, you want to call for an adjournment, sir?
Sure, you bet. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this concludes the joint meeting of the DCTA board together with the NTMC board. So I will now adjourn the DCTA board meeting. Do we have to have a motion in a second for that, Joe?
No, you can just have an adjournment. Just make sure that as DCTA board members, you do leave the Zoom call so we don't have a quorum of.
Okay, yes, no,
DCTA board
trust me.
members.
Yes, I will.
Okay, so Joe, I
Do
have
that
a question on
expeditiously.
that. I have a question on that. We leave this Zoom call. Do we type back into that same Zoom
No,
call?
sorry. Only the DCTA members should leave the Zoom call. The rest
Oh.
stay on. I
Oh,
believe
okay.
they set it up.
All right, so
Okay.
we will adjourn this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Denton County Transportation Authority at 12:12 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Great discussion. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Dean, we can give them a few seconds here to get off, and then we can just do our adjourn back to the
Sure.
NTMC board.
And I take it that Member Hensley is not going to be able to join us. I don't see her on here.
Actually, Mr. Chair, she was on and she just now dropped off. Oh, no, she's still on there. Excuse me. She is still on her phone.
Great.
Come on.
He's on
Great.
iPhone.
My list is moving around.
I understand. Okay, just let everyone know we do have a quorum here. Can we tell, is everybody else signed off?
It appears Director Gilmore is still signed in, but he is muted and off video, so I don't believe he is technically on.
Can you kick him off?
Let me
He's
see.
also the only DCTA board member that I see, so it would not be a quorum, so it should be fine. But I will defer to Joe on that.
Please note, I am removing him from the meeting, so.
Sorry, TJ.
Okay,
Good.
so we have a quorum. So can I go ahead and call the NTMC special call meeting to order at 12:14 p.m. Thank everyone. I apologize for the time. Sarah, I'm so sorry it took up so much of your time, but everyone actually. But I think it was good. I think
That's all right. That's all right.
I think we got some good communication out there, some good, I do appreciate everyone's comments. I truly do. We have to speak up to let everyone know our frustrations. If we just let them bottled in, no one understands it. So it was good to get those out. I think there's some things we can do going forward to improve, as Chairman Suarez mentioned earlier, and we can do that at another board meeting. But today, to try to get you out of here, basically, we're looking at item number 1, which is authorize the president to negotiate and execute the collective bargaining agreement with Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1338. I hope John Hendrickson is still here. Are you still here with us, John?
Yes, he is signed in still.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes, sir. That's all right. No, that's all right. We've taken up a lot of your time today, and I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah,
So I take it things are still as presented in our Monday meeting with the union contract, that there's no variance from those issues you've given us?
No, sir. We still have tentative signed agreements. I haven't heard back from the union when they're going to ratify their side of it, but we're moving forward on our side, doing what we're supposed to do, and they're moving forward on their side, doing what they're supposed to do. So I think we're still moving forward. I mean, I guess there could be a possibility that the union doesn't ratify it and then we have to come back, but on our side, we would just have to, go back into negotiations. So.
Okay. Does any member, anyone, staff have any comments or questions on it?
Chair Euchert, this is Christina Holcomb. I would recommend that once we do have a solid agreement with the union, that Joe and you as chair review that item before I execute.
Does staff have, does the board have any questions? I would like to add to that. I think that's a good idea, Ms. Holcomb. I would like to add Vice Chair Hayes on that in case one of us is tied up or something, that the three of us, that would not constitute a quorum, but the Councilor Graffita and Member Hayes and I as Vice Chair be able to oversee that. Because I know Member Hayes is sometimes better at pointing out details in legal ratifications than I am, so it might be good to have his input.
And we are going just with what is currently being proposed, right? So we are not extending it for any additional amendments or changes at this time. So the board will be approving at what is being proposed at this time, approval and signature by the president after review by legal and board member Hayes and the chair, correct?
I agree. That's my understanding from what Mr. Hendrickson just said. Yes, this is what we are approving is the tentative agreement that we've all been given by staff, that we approve that tentative agreement. And after we review it, make sure it's that your legal does it, make sure it's what we said. And then it's up to the union to ratify that. If they make any changes to that, it will once again have to come back to the NTMC board for further discussion.
Agreed. Is that a motion?
Is everyone okay with that? Sarah, you okay with that?
Yes, yes, yes. I second the motion.
All in favor? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Joe, can you help Lindsay understand who made that motion?
Thank
so
you.
We
I
can get
was
it correct in the minutes.
just going to ask that.
It was made by chair. The chair made the motion.
Okay.
Okay.
And Dean, just for clarification, I was going to ask
Yes,
this
sir.
before, but I guess it goes without saying, the staff is recommending approval of the contract as amended, as to be amended.
Is that correct, staff?
From an NTMC officer perspective, we are fully aligned with John Hendrickson's recommendation on the tentative agreement.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Don't see any need to go to an executive session unless someone has something they'd like to discuss on that issue. It'd be that particular issue there. Okay. We can go. We're still in future agenda items. I know there was one Member Suarez that you suggested in our last meeting, put on that. We will get with staff to work on that. In fact, I might visit with you on that a little bit beforehand to kind of get your thoughts on that. We'll make sure we don't do a quorum. Remember, we cannot have more than two of us discuss any particular item at any time, except in an open meeting. And there's a couple of things I'd like to put on there, but we can go over those at a later date. We will need to call a special session, in my understanding, another special meeting for Monday's coming Monday, April the 5th. Can everyone make that meeting? And hopefully that will be a very short meeting. It'll be, but typically.
If we could do it at,
Go ahead.
if we could do it at 8:30, I think I've got a 9 o'clock, and I already bugged out of the meeting earlier for this one. So if I could, we could do it from 8:30 to 9.
8:30 can work from the NTMC officer standpoint. But can you remind us what the item is that needs to be on that agenda?
It's the approval of the contract for general manager and assistant general manager.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yep, with John Hendrickson.
Right. So to that point, if anyone has any specific discussion that comes up in your thoughts between now and that time, if you would get those to Councilor Graffita, so we could maybe do the research and have it prepared and ready for that meeting Monday morning, that would help us expedite this so we don't have another long meeting.
And as far as process for the agenda building, Joe, since it sounds like you'll be putting the agenda together, I assume you'll be getting the necessary reviews and approvals from the chair on that?
I will be working with John Hendrickson to put the contract together. And then I can provide you with the agenda language. And then I will work with the chair and circulate the contract, just depending on timing wise and when we can get it done. So.
And what would be our posting day and time? The minimum?
if it's for Monday, I'll get you the I mean, we can post it on Friday, or we can even post it before. I'll give you the language. So it's just going to be approval of the contract.
Chair Euchert, will you be available to review and approve the agenda prior to posting?
Yes, ma'am. And just, if y'all can continue, because of some of it's going, most of it's not going to spam anymore, but I still get an occasional one to spam. So you'll just make sure that by email and then a text that I got them, I'll respond back to you. Now, if we do it Monday morning at 8:30, we'll need to post by Friday morning at 8:30. Is that right, Counselor?
Yes.
Okay, so it need to be posted by Friday morning at 8:30.
And I think Lindsay may have put a pretty solid draft together already. So hopefully we can get that sent out later today after we get Joe's magic put on it.
Right. Once you get Joe's stuff, you can put it together, send it out tomorrow if you want to, or I hate to put you to today. We've had such a long time. But if you can get it sent tomorrow, then we can look at it and go ahead and post it tomorrow evening.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, this is Raymond
Yes,
Suarez. I would appreciate a phone call at your convenience. If you'd let me know when you think you might be able to do that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you.
Any other discussion towards the future agenda items, anything like that? Anything on report of items of community interest? What is that, Joe? I just now saw that.
If there are just any items of community interest that the board members desire to discuss.
Okay.
And I think that's left over from the joint meeting. That's a DCTA standing item on the agenda. So we apologize.
Okay. And that might be something good for us to put on there. So, all right. Sounds good.
All right.
Anybody got anything? Hear a
No.
motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Have a motion to adjourn in a second. I appreciate everyone's help and all your time and efforts. And I know it's been consuming. We're going to fix it and just move straight on down the road. Thank
That's
everyone.
right. Thank you, Dean, for
Thank
leading
y'all.
us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dean.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, board.
All in
chair-
favor?
Board members.
Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Thank y'all. Take care and God bless.
Likewise.